Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, How to Go Electric for Renters. I'm Joe Wachunas with Electrify Now, here as always with Brian Stewart. Today's webinar is brought to you by Electrify Now, which is an all-volunteer organization promoting electrification as the quickest path to decarbonization and something that we can all take an active part in achieving, as well as the San Diego Learn program, which is a workforce education and training program that's partnered with us at Electrify Now to offer these free energy efficiency and electrification webinars. Please visit the Learn website for more information, www.sandiegolearn.com. Lots of great info there. Cool. Okay, well, today's topic, we are talking about how to go electric for renters. We do a lot of chatting about all the benefits of electrification for homeowners and all these benefits of lower energy bills, cleaner indoor and outdoor air, more comfort and increased safety. They're all the same, but there are different ways to achieve this electrification if you are a renter rather than a homeowner. So we're going to dive into that today.
Great. So there's going to be kind of two parts of this webinar today. We're going to start with what we call DIY electrification actions, things that people can do on their own. Because you don't own all your appliances and you don't own the building, there are limitations, but there's still a lot of things that that renters can do on their own. Or maybe if you've got a sympathetic landlord, you can talk them into working around some of these specific issues, and we'll go into all that in detail. But then there's this other maybe looming question of how do we make sure that all rental properties ultimately have some path towards electrification? You know, there might be policies that are involved in here, but there's also ways that renters can work with their landlords to look at these upgrades that make properties both more energy efficient and also reduce carbon emissions. So we'll talk about that in the second chunk. And we've got a great panelist to help us get into that topic. So these are the things we're going to talk about. We are going to put a link in the chat to a handout that we've prepared that you can take a look at later. We'll send that out to everyone who registers. So if you don't need to bother with it now, if you don't want to, we'll send you the link later. But there's things you can do to make sure you get clean electricity. There's cooking options, space heating and cooling options, ways to do laundry that eliminate use of gas appliances, yard tools and EV charging. All these things are available to renters, even though you don't necessarily own your property.
Yeah, and so let's start with how to get clean electricity.
Sorry to interrupt. Hey, I just want to remind people, put questions. If you've got questions about this stuff, put it in the Q&A, please, because it's harder for us to monitor the chat. We'll try to make sure we answer these questions as we go, your questions as we go, and otherwise we'll catch them at the end. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah. So yeah, maybe the first step is making sure that this electricity that's coming into your sockets is really clean. So reducing your emissions from electricity can save a lot of carbon emissions. Electricity is getting cleaner all the time, but not totally clean right now. But if you're in a typical single family home, you're looking at being able to save 3 to 6 tons of CO2 a year, or in an apartment, 1 to 3 tons. So that's a lot of savings. And how do you do that if you're a renter? Well, the first way to think about is if there is a community choice aggregator in where you live in your state, and you can see some of the states that offer a community choice aggregation. They are CCAs. You can sign up for this program where communities purchase the energy for their home, and a lot of time this energy is really renewable and really green, if not all of the energy. And a lot of times the cost is a little lower as well. Another way is to go through a community solar program. You can see the states that offer community solar programs on the screen as well. And if you live in a state with a community solar program, this is where a lot of folks subscribe to a big solar array that's somewhere in your utilities territory. And then that solar array is built and then produces energy that goes onto the grid. And you usually get a lower price on your utility bill. It's really easy as well. And then finally, there's the green power plans. And this is pretty much all over the country. Almost every utility offers a green power plan where you can buy clean, renewable energy, usually for a nominal cost as well. So that can help. All these ways can help you clean up the electricity that's coming into your home as a renter.
I think it's fair to say that options 1 and 2 are the most powerful in terms of what they do for the grid and for making sure that we are heading towards renewable energy all over the country. But if those options aren't available to you and you can't put solar panels on your own roof because you're a renter, then these green power plans are the next best thing to do, and they're widely available. So yeah.
Great. Okay, the next option that we have is also electric cooking. And not only does this help reduce your use of fossil gas, but it also can really clean your air and reduce that indoor air pollution that we've been hearing a lot about and increase the safety. So with induction stoves, you can avoid some of these that dangerous indoor air pollution we keep hearing a lot about, which is carbon monoxide, NO2, NOx, benzene, fine particulate, and then methane leaking into your home. We see lots of folks that have done a lot of research showing that gas stoves increase air pollution and increase the risk of childhood asthma and asthma severity, as well as comparing the benzene that's produced when you use fossil gas in your home to that of cigarette smoking. You might have seen recently, and I'll put an article in the chat showing that gas increases cancer in children. This just came out last week. So avoiding by electrifying your cooking as a renter, you can avoid all of this dangerous pollution. But Brian, how do we electrify cooking as a renter?
Well, there's a lot of really great options. The more I've dug into this, more options I find. I've used a lot of these myself, not all of them, but it starts maybe with cooking, because really the main thing you want to be doing with your stove is eliminating the use of gas. With combination of these devices we're showing here, it's potential that you could even like turn the gas off to your range if you wanted to, because these induction hot plates are really affordable, widely available. You can get them on Amazon, a lot of places. They come in single or double hobs, sort of like two burners, and not really burners, but they work with magnetic energy that heats the pot and then heats the food. So they're super efficient. And they're relatively low cost, as you can see here. They're easy to clean because you basically just wipe off this glass surface. So that's a great option. I've used these a lot. They're amazing. And that's probably one of the most important things that you can do. You can get an electric kettle so you're not boiling water on the range. And then the other thing that's really interesting is there's more and more of these toaster ovens or air fryers. Some of them do both, but the air fryers are really interesting. Because if you think about your oven, for example, most of the time when you're cooking, you've got something relatively small in this big space, unless you're doing, having all your friends over for Thanksgiving, you're not really utilizing the whole oven most of the time. So these small little air fryers are amazing. You can cook quickly and efficiently right on your countertop and not use your gas oven. So all these devices combined makes you capable of reducing your indoor air pollution from gas stoves, which is really a dangerous thing. Now, you might also think about actually talking to your landlord about swapping out your current gas range for an induction range. They tend to start around $1,000. There might be some wiring issues associated with this because you need 240 volts to run most of the ones. The cheaper ones, they're more expensive ones that will run on 120, but the lower price ones need 240. But there's also rebates that you might qualify from the IRA as a renter, up to about $840, depending on where you live and your income qualifications. So it's possible that you could sort of have a negotiation with your landlord about replacing an older gas range if one of those is in your home. One thing to keep in mind about induction, you might need to update some of your pots. Cast iron and ceramic will definitely work. Anything that's magnetic, you can use a magnet and stick it on the bottom of your pot to see if your pots will work. Most stainless steel will, but not all, so you need to test that. Aluminum and copper definitely won't work. So keep that in mind. But it's a really great and performance upgrade too, because cooking with induction is a lot more, you have much more temperature control and et cetera. You might also think about switching to an electric grill. Most rental properties don't even allow gas or a charcoal just for fire risk, but these new electric grills, I'm a real fan of this one from Weber, but there's other good ones. We did a whole webinar on this. We'll put some links. Actually, there's some links in that fact sheet to some information we have on electric cooking for grilling. But these things are great. They heat up quickly. They're tabletop or freestanding. They have really precise control. None of the pollution that comes from cooking with charcoal or gas. Much easier to clean, et cetera. So I'm a big fan of these. I use these all the time. And that's something you might include in your home.
Hey, Brian, before you go on to the portable heat pumps, Lori is wondering if we have any thoughts on how many induction hot plates can be used at once in one outlet. Any thoughts on that?
I think you could use two, but you might have to test it. You might pop a circuit breaker. It depends on the amperage of that circuit. But there are devices that come with two hobs, and those are also 120 volts. So you might have to play around with that. But my guess is you can run two. You might not be able to run two on high, so that's something you'll just have to play around with. Yeah. Okay. Space heating is probably the biggest thing you can do in terms of reducing your use of gas if you're just talking about quantities of gas you're using. But there's also really, there's some really good solutions if you have electric baseboard heating, because electric baseboard heating can be quite expensive. And there are more and more of these portable space heaters that have heat pumps in them that actually cool and heat. And a lot of these things are becoming available now that you should know about. There's kind of two classifications of them. The lower cost ones are really only good for supplemental heat. And what we mean by that is that they're going to give you great cooling, but they're only going to provide heat down to about, when the outdoor temperature is about 40 degrees, maybe 38, maybe a little bit lower, but they basically don't work once it gets really cold because they don't have defrost cycles and all the things that cold climate heat pumps have. But for shoulder seasons, or maybe you live in an area that doesn't get often below 40 degrees, these things can provide plenty of heat for a single room, maybe even a couple of rooms if you've got good connectivity between the rooms. They come in these window mounted options that look just like window air conditioners. They have these saddle mounted ones, which are great because they reduce the amount of the window space. It means you can still see out the window. You can still open the window, which is great. Or these portable ones, which are also nice. There's sometimes restrictions for renters about whether they can have window mounted units. So these portable ones where the whole unit is indoors is also an option. They're typically called air conditioners with supplemental heat. We did a whole program on this. We're doing another one next month on this exact topic. We'll put a link in the chat to that, or send that out to you with the show notes later. These all run on 120 volts. So they're 3 times more energy efficient than regular electric resistance heating.
And Brian, while you're on that slide, Taylor's wondering if, some of these window ACs that are marketed as heat pumps might have an electric resistive heater inside, and so use a lot more energy. Is there any advice?
Yeah, you have to be careful. So when you're shopping for these models that are in this kind of $500 to $800 range, there will be some that have electric resistance heaters in them. So you really have to kind of look. That's why we have a fact sheet on that's on our website that has the exact models that are available today that have heat pumps in them, not electric resistance. And I would highly recommend you take a look at that. I don't know. Do we have a link for that?
I'll get a link for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The other exciting things about this space is there's some newer models that are coming online now. They're more expensive, but they're going to be cheaper than installing like a mini split or something like that. And again, they're portable. So you can take all these things. That one of the advantages for renters is if you move, you could take these devices with you. These are more like $2,000 to $4,000, but they're going to work down to like 5 degrees or sometimes even cooler, like 0 or -5. They were basically built for East Coast conditions, and New York City was one of the sponsors of some technology challenges to get these things developed. And there they have cold winters. So these devices, which are just starting to be available to consumers, are really great because they will work in all temperatures. They're much more energy efficient than those other devices we just showed you. That's what you get for more money. But they run on 120 volts. You can install them yourself. You might take 2 people because these are more heavy. These are heavier than those units we just showed you. But these are really fantastic. These are the 3 options that are available today from Idea, Gree, and Gradient. You can see 2 of them are the saddleback style and one is window style. But these are really cool. And like I say, we're going to have much more information on this at our upcoming webinar next month.
Great. And I'm putting links into the chat for some of those cold climate heat pumps now. And so let's round out the technologies that are available to renters. Electric fireplaces are another one to consider. These can be very DIY, where you just plug in an electric fireplace into a normal 120 volt outlet. They can be very low cost, starting at $150. I think the one that we bought for our house was around $500. So really, really low cost and easy to install. The one thing you want to think about with electric fireplaces is that most, if not all of them, have just electric resistance heating. So a lot of folks just use them just for the ambiance, to have that flame in the home, that flame appearance in the home. It's not a real flame. And but if you run the electric resistance heater a lot, that's more expensive, more inefficient heating. Okay, and then electric clothes washing and drying. Of course, laundry appliances account for about 8 to 10% of home energy. And if you have a gas dryer in your home, there's some strategies that you can use even as a renter to get off of gas and electrify it and make it more efficient and reduce your utility bills. So, of course, the easiest thing to do, something I did today, beautiful, when you have some beautiful weather, you can just get that $50 hang drying rack or even less, and hang your clothes to dry. Nothing beats the smell of laundry dried outdoors. But there's also other technology like portable mini dryers, which plug into 120 volts and can sit on top of a gas dryer or other laundry machine, and you can dry your clothes that way. You want to choose the low heat option because these can use a lot of energy. Again, it's electric resistance for these portable mini dryers, but it can be a good option to get rid of that gas.
Yeah,
and then,
Joe, I noticed that some of them, if you look at the fine print when you're looking at these on Amazon or any other place, you'll see that some of them require a vent to the outdoors and some of them are ventless. The ventless ones are really interesting to me because that's going to make it easiest. You don't have to disconnect your existing dryer in order to use it. But very cool options. But as Joe mentioned, put it on low. We have an electric dryer and we put it on low heat. It works fine. It might take an extra 10 minutes to dry your load, but it's uses a fraction of the energy because it's the heater, not the motor that tumbles, that takes up most of the electricity.
Perfect. And then, yeah, speaking of ventless, this new technology, we'll be doing another webinar on this one later in the year. These combo washers and heat pump dryers can be a great option that the renters can then even take with them afterwards. They cost around $2,000, so a little bit more expensive, but you do all your washing and drying in one unit, and it has a heat pump dryer. I just got one of these, and I put my electricity reader on the outlet, and it used less than a kilowatt hour to wash and dry an entire load of laundry. It's incredible. They have bigger drums, up to 5 cubic feet. They're ventless and they plug into that 120 volt outlet. So this is really a great option for landlords or tenants to get when you're renting, to electrify and dry your clothes really efficiently.
Okay, so the other thing, this is near and dear to my heart. If you are a renter that has an outdoor space that you take care of, you might really want to consider electric yard tools. I think this is happening at such a fast rate. It's becoming really common. If you go to places like Lowe's or Home Depot, there's huge assortments of these tools available. But these electric yard tools are great for a lot of reasons. They're lower cost to operate. They're way easier to start and maintain, unbelievably more quiet, no air pollution from them, and then dramatically less carbon pollution. And they just get better and better and better. In fact, a lot of the commercial landscape people are starting to switch to this equipment because it's as powerful as gas. An easy way to understand the comparison here is to look at lawnmowers, but this is true for leaf blowers or string trimmers or anything. The cost upfront is getting to be more and more parity. It used to be that the electric ones were more expensive because of the batteries, but now as battery costs are coming down, these costs are very close. You can get a gas lawnmower for a little under $400 maybe, but an entry electric one is going to cost $450. So very close to the same starting cost and unbelievably quieter. Like, these are the ratings, 50 to 70 dBA versus 80 to 110. If you're not familiar with this, when you increase loudness by 10 dBA, like going from 50 to 60, let's say, that's twice as loud. It's perceived from people as twice as loud. So a gas mower is anywhere from 2 to as much as 30 times louder than an electric mower. And most likely you're in that kind of 10 to 20 range. So a lot quieter. Your neighbors will notice that you won't lose your hearing by using these things. And they're way cheaper to operate. You're talking about pennies per hour versus dollars per hour. And of course, there's no maintenance, no spark plugs, and no refueling, no filters to clean, all that stuff, which is such a hassle with gas power tools. And then the carbon emissions, even if you're just using regular electricity in the United States, it's you know, a fraction of the carbon that is being produced by these things. And if you've got clean energy in your home and you're charging your batteries that way, this is literally zero emissions for all that lawn care. So that's a really kind of a no-brainer thing. And then finally, I think the last part of our talk here on DIY actions has to do with EVs. Now, of course, if you have a car, you're a candidate for an EV. The question is really more about charging. And, you know, I think it's important to remind people that no matter where you live, you're going to avoid a lot of carbon emissions. It can be as much as 4 to 8 tons if you're charging with clean energy. Even with regular energy right out of the, you know, without doing anything, you're talking about half the carbon emissions or a third of the carbon emissions generally compared to a gas car. No air pollution, which is one of the reasons why these things are so appealing in places like California, where air pollution is a big problem. That's why there's so many subsidies for these. They have higher reliability. Just a report came out from Germany that said that it's about, I think it's 1/4 as much in terms of warranty claims on EVs compared to gas cars. They have way lower maintenance, virtually nothing. You have to replace tires and windshield wipers. And plus, you get way more mileage for the dollar, around $3, sorry, 3 times more miles per dollar. So you're roughly, for average use, you're talking about at least $1,000 worth of operating savings per year. So plenty of reasons to do this. So how do you charge if you're living in a rental property? It requires, if you want to charge at home, you have to have reliable access to electricity. For most people, using the level 1 charger that comes with the device that plugs right into 120 volt thing is going to give you plenty of range. It's going to give you like somewhere between 3 to 5 miles of range per hour. So if you've got your car parked for 8 to 10 hours, you're talking about 30 to 50 miles of range, which for most people is plenty. And then maybe every once in a while, if you drive more, you got to go to a public charging station. But I'm a big fan of these because they don't take a lot of power on the electricity side in terms of circuits and all that kind of stuff, and gives you the range that most people need. You can upgrade to a level 2 charger that might need 240 amps. So this is where it gets more complicated. If you're a homeowner or a renter, you might not have access to that. So I think level 2 is, for most people, you don't really even need it. And there's always level 3 available. You know, more and more of these stations all across the country, everywhere, shopping malls, etc., where you can go and top up if your level 1 charger isn't giving you quite enough. All right, so those are the topics. Clean electricity, make sure you do that first. Electric cooking is probably one of the most important things if you care about indoor air quality. Your portable space heating is going to save you the most money, particularly if you've got electric baseboard heat, but even gas heating. And then clothes washing, electric power tools. That's kind of a no-brainer if you just want to get off of gas. And then EVs, you know, I think it's a lot easier to charge than most people think. Okay, Joe, are there any questions we need to answer before we go on to the next topic?
Ones on incentives. Folks are asking if the IRA rebates are still happening. They are still happening to our knowledge this year, although the government is considering changing significant portions of them. Could be next year. That's still uncertain, but this year is a great year to electrify your systems and take advantage of those rebates. And then, Brian, someone's asking if there are any rebates for those portable cold climate room heat pumps yet.
Not yet, but I think that's something that's changing. We're going to discuss that exact topic in our upcoming webinar, because basically, as soon as those units qualify for the same level of performance that the stationary units do, they will get IRA incentives. So I think that's something that we need to dive into a little bit more. Angela, looks like you've got some information about that.
Just briefly, this is so location specifically, and hello all, I'm going to be speaking later in the webinar. I do want to mention that the city of Menlo Park and possibly other cities do have programs that are newly providing subsidies for the portable heat pump units, and I provide a link to that in my presentation. Stay tuned.
Great. Well, I think that's a good segue, Brian, to introducing our panelists. Thanks for your patience as we ran through that. But yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, before I introduce Angela, you know, I think it's fair to say that if you're paying attention, you might have noticed, or I don't know if you're paying attention, if you're a geek on electrification stuff like we are, you will have noticed that many states are adopting building codes, in some cases building performance standards. And both of these things are going to affect new buildings for sure, that basically encourage, or in some cases mandate, new construction, particularly for multifamily. So with new buildings, there's more going on in terms of kind of requirements, let's say, or motivation for new buildings to be all electric. And you see that a lot in multifamily developments, that more and more of them are developed all electric to begin with. But what about all the existing buildings? Because there's large multifamilies, but even single family dwellings that are rental properties. How are we going to make sure that those properties get upgraded to increase their energy efficiency, the safety, and all these benefits that we've talked about? So that's why we are introducing our speaker here, Angela Evans. She's the director of Menlo Spark. It's in Menlo Park. Don't get confused by those two things. She leads Menlo Spark's building electrification work, which is including policy advocacy, public and private partnerships, multifamily electrification pilot projects, which she'll be speaking about, and the creation of local clean energy workforce with its local nonprofit job train. Angela served with the City of Menlo Park's Environmental Quality Commission and on the board of Stanford's Professional Women's Group. She has a deep background in environmental science and business with a career that spanned Environmental Defense Fund and eBay. She holds a BS in Earth Systems from Stanford University and an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. We're really excited to have Angela join us today and share with us her experience from Menlo Park and across California, and on this important topic of how we electrify multifamily and rental properties in California and across the country.
Thank you.
Welcome, Angela.
Thank you, Brian, for that nice introduction. And I have shared my screen here for my presentation. So yes, very briefly, hello, everybody. I am Angela Evans. I'm a director at Menlo Spark. Our nonprofit organization was established originally to provide zero carbon emissions in our city of Menlo Park. And we have a special focus on building electrification to achieve that end. We also work on regional and state climate policy and a number of hands-on climate precedents, one of which I'm going to go into more detail about today. I also want to say up front that throughout my presentation, because of where I live and where I work, there are a lot of California-based examples, but please know that most of what I'm about to say pertains to renters anywhere throughout the country. And I see folks here from all over the country, on the East Coast, in the middle of the country, etc. So this is still very much relevant to you. And one second, there we go. Okay, so here's what I'm going to go over with you today. And interestingly enough, the last time it has been renumbered, which is really odd. Some folks made edits to my presentation in the 11th hour. And, that is supposed to say 1, 2, 3, 4, but that's fine. So the first two, I'm going to breeze through fairly quickly. And the last two, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on, okay? All right, so first section, how can building electrification benefit renters? Let's just go over some of those basic concepts. Some of this may be review for you, but I think it's worth mentioning up front here, okay? So, we all know that the benefits of building electrification are numerous and profound. Let's begin with the most obvious one that Joe mentioned, which is that renters absolutely can participate in the decarbonization of our economy by reducing natural gas usage. Natural gas is actually an industry term for methane. I don't know if most folks know that. And the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has, in no uncertain terms, told us again and again that we need to slash methane usage drastically in order to avoid the worst outcomes of climate change. Now, public health benefits of building electrification is another major benefit here. Again, Joe went into a lot of great detail and provided links to some of the studies on that, so I won't spend a ton of time. That could be a presentation in and of itself. But let me just briefly explain that burning gas in buildings releases a number of air quality pollutants like benzene, as Joe mentioned, carbon monoxide, and nitrogen dioxide, or what we typically call NOx. Okay, and NOx also combines with other compounds in the atmosphere to form what you'll see on the screen here, PM 2.5. Some folks refer to that as particle pollution, and that can lodge deeply into human lungs and even enter human bloodstreams. And the list of potential public health concerns from NOx and PM 2.5 that are a result of burning gas in buildings are listed here in a table from our regional air quality district. And you can see that it involves a number of very serious respiratory, cardiac, and other diagnoses. Now, building electrification also importantly reduces fire hazards associated with combusting gas in buildings. Not to mention that the installation, here I'm pointing to my cursor, of a heat pump HVAC system, that's an electric, very efficient heating and cooling system, can provide air conditioning or cooling for the very first time, especially for people who haven't had it before, since heat pump HVAC systems, as many of you know, are two-in-one systems that provide both heating and cooling from the same machine. I don't know why it's okay. So this slide here gives a sense of scale of the health implications from burning gas in buildings. The first one shows unbelievably that the amount of NOx that is produced from gas appliances in California homes exceeds by 4 times the amount of NOx that is released from the state's gas power plants. So see if you can wrap your head around that, okay? The magnitude here of what we're dealing with is enormous. In the Bay Area, the gas appliances that we burn in our homes and buildings generates more NOx than all of the Bay Area's passenger cars. Okay, so this is a really big deal. So another benefit that renters can glean, importantly, and this is one that people ask about first and foremost, is that so this study shown here and the study that I'm going to show you on the next slide show the financial impact of electrification on monthly utility bills for renters or homeowners. And both studies show an average savings of about $30 per month after installing electric heat pumps. Now, given that electricity rates, so both of these examples here, this slide as well as the next slide, are showcasing studies based in California. So they're based on California electricity rates, which happen to be some of the highest in the country right now. And so the fact that these studies are still showing average savings, even with those California electricity rates, probably means that it's a safe assumption that many other parts of the United States are going to save on their utility bills post-electrification as well. And there's a nice little note here on this slide that highlights some of the greatest savings actually in San Diego County. You can go back and dig into that a little bit more so, okay? One thing I want to call out about these studies is that they purposely do not take into account the cost of brand new air conditioning usage if you did not have air conditioning before you installed your heat pump HVAC system. However, I'm going to go over in my section 4 ways that renters can think about using their air conditioning in ways that truly minimizes their electricity bills. Okay, upcoming California regulations. So the good news, after citing all of those problems, is that there are regulatory bodies within the state of California, in addition to a state of California, and I think I see someone here from the state of California CARB agency, that are pending and are about to address everything we just discussed in the next few years. So this slide focuses on 3 regional regulatory bodies, or 3 air districts, which have regulatory authority over air pollution as it relates to public health. And in the case of these rules, nitrogen dioxides, or NOx, which I mentioned previously. And these districts have issued rules about NOx emissions as it relates to water heating and space heating. So it's addressing your water heaters and your gas furnaces, okay? Now, just for the purposes of an example, I'm going to drill into the Bay Area rules here, which in my view, at least at this point in time, tend to be the strongest with respect to public health and climate impacts. And you can see that as of 2027, the residential sized water heaters that emit NOx can no longer be sold or installed in the Bay Area. Now, you're still allowed to operate your gas water heater if it's still working in 2027, but the idea is that when the water heater dies, or when you are otherwise choosing to replace it, you need to replace it with a zero NOx version, or your building owner is going to need to replace it with a zero NOx version. And the common solution then is to install an electric heat pump water heater instead. And this same concept is going to apply to furnaces in 2029, and then commercial sized or larger shared systems in 2031. Okay, here's just a quick page on the state of California, which is also scoping zero climate emission appliance rules for 2030, excuse me, again, involving water and space heating appliances. And these rules will very much impact both homeowners and renters in a variety of different buildings. Okay, so these regulations are still a few years out. So the question is, then what can we do in the renting community to convince our building owners to get a head start and electrify and give us, the renters, the benefits that we just articulated? So this is a really important one here. So the first big thing is for renters to figure out who makes or influences appliance decisions in your unit. So in addition to reaching out to your building owner or landlord, you may wish to reach out to your property management company if relevant. In my anecdotal experience, property management staff can often have substantial influence over appliance research, and then the building owner can then sign off on it. So pay attention to who's involved in decision making and attempt to educate all of them if you can. Okay, now this slide may seem very obvious, but it's extremely important to approach your building owner early with requests to electrify, getting ahead of your building's appliance replacement schedules, and ensuring that when the time for replacement comes, or even if there's an unexpected equipment failure, which in my experience happens all the time, your building owner has clear direction on how to electrify, potentially save money while doing it, and prioritize clean, healthy appliances. Now, I highlight this because I actually had an experience through Menlo Spark where a local public official let us know that one of our large public housing apartments in our city was about to replace its declining gas boiler system that provided water heating and space heating in about 80 plus units. But we found out too late. By the time Menlo Spark approached the building, some of the permits had already been pulled. Some of the parts for the new gas boiler system had already been ordered by the contractor. And so even though we and our partners were actually able to show, like mathematically, that they could save money by installing a heat pump HVAC system and newly acquiring the cooling that they wanted to get in the next few years anyways, there was just too much inertia in the other direction. So lean in soon and early to avoid that kind of scenario. There's a lot of content on this slide purposely. I'm not going to go through it all. It's meant to be a resource. It's also meant to not be comprehensive necessarily. These are subsidies that, at least in the state of California, that are available to both low and moderate income folks, as well as market rate who may not necessarily have otherwise qualify per income. And this second bullet here, actually the switches on, allows you to enter your zip code and see what public subsidies might be available to you. I also want to call out that, and you can just take a look here, there's a number at the federal level, which still exist, as we mentioned, some at the state level, some are regional specific, some are specific to your CCAs, that's a term Joe mentioned, or your electric utilities. And even the city of Menlo Park, which is in the very last bullet, they actually have a relatively new program with even higher income qualifications than had before that will provide no-cost home electrification subsidies, benefits to renters and homeowners. So check out that link there, okay? This is just a highlight of the state program, California Equitable Decarbonization Program. That is what we call a direct install program for those who qualify. And so they select the contractors. They will manage a whole home at no cost or low cost for low to moderate income building owners, start to finish. Check out the link there. Okay, this is a really important one. Oh, I also want to mention on this previous slide, there are, the state of California has selected by RFP 3 different organizations to administer this program in different parts of the state. And so I'm going to add a slide with those organizations to the appendix after this presentation so that you can see those. One of them that happens to have been selected for Northern California is the Association for Energy Affordability. Menlo Spark has worked with them frequently. And in fact, you can contact that organization directly, even if you're not going through the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program, because Association for Energy Affordability also helps all building owners, and helps them access subsidies in a variety of different ways and provides technical expertise. Okay, so here's a really important one that I have attempted to illustrate with pictures. So, if your building owner wants to replace their old standalone air conditioning system or obtain air conditioning for the first time because extreme heat has become more intense, it is much cheaper to purchase and install one electric heat pump HVAC system than it is to purchase and install two separate systems, like a new replacement gas furnace and a new replacement standalone air conditioning system. Okay, so this is really important to explain this to your building owner. Okay, and then this next slide just validates what I just explained on the previous one. There's a quote here from the co-founder and principal of Carbon Zero Buildings, which in my personal view has a tremendous amount of experience in California electrification of large multifamily buildings. And he talks about how it can often be a no-brainer, especially with respect to the heat pump HVAC system, for the reasons I just explained. Okay, now this one starts to get a little technical, so stay with me, but this one is actually crucially important. So historically, contractors of conventional wisdom used to necessitate that if you start electrifying appliances in your building, it's going to trigger a necessary upgrade to your electrical panel. And upgrading electrical panels can be very expensive, time consuming. It can be associated with a lot of hassle sometimes. And the expense can be potentially on the order of tens of thousands of dollars. It can delay projects by months and months. And so the fear of these panel upgrades has, at least historically, in many cases, dissuaded building owners from even considering electrification. They don't want to do that. They don't want to deal with all of that. But thankfully, this panel upgrade myth has now been largely debunked. They are typically unnecessary, and I go into a tremendous amount of detail about what tools building owners, contractors, electricians can use in order to electrify, in many cases, the entire housing unit, all appliances from gas to electric, without upgrading your panel. There's something called the Watt diet, which is essentially choosing the right appliance for your space. And here's where it gets a little technical, stay with me, there is an optional part of the National Electric Code that electricians use to create loads, model loads, and it allows a lot more flexibility than some of the other codes. Again, go to the appendix, don't worry about the details, but please do share them with your building owner and their contractor and their electrician, and they can dig into it and find out how they can do this. Now, the next two slides and the appendix will showcase two real-world examples by Menlo Spark and multifamily buildings. Okay, so this is a building called Willow Court that is in the Bellhaven community of our city of Menlo Park. And we did, this was the first fully electrified existing multifamily building in San Mateo County, which is where we are. And we electrified all of the gas appliances. Gas lines are capped. We worked in partnership with the Association for Energy Affordability and an affordable housing nonprofit organization called Mid-Penn Housing. Okay, and we did this all without needing to upgrade the electrical panels. And I show in the appendix the loads that I put together that model how this can be done. Okay, and there's also a very lengthy case study that documents everything that we did there that you can dig in or share with your building owner if you want to. And just very briefly, again, there's more details in the appendix. Two technologies that I think are worth potentially highlighting to your building owner, property management company, are the 120 volt water heaters and the 120 volt combo washer dryers, which Joe mentioned earlier in the presentation. Both are very efficient appliances that have all the benefits of climate friendly, public health friendly heat pump appliance technology, and they save a lot of room on your panel. Okay. Okay, and so After electrification, it's very important that we educate renters on how to minimize their utility bills. And a big piece of this is to know that the major utilities, and here I highlight San Diego Gas and Electric Utility, they offer different electric transmission rate plans that you can consider. And some of which offer much lower volumetric pricing, or dollars per kilowatt. And there are third parties, like in the Bay Area, there's a program called the Home Intel Program, which partners with PG&E, that can provide free assistance on rate optimization in English and in Spanish. You can contact your utility. Here I've linked to San Diego's, and find out, after you've electrified an appliance or two, or your building owner is, what rate should I be on as a renter so that my utility bills are minimized. So that one's really important. See if this one is not showing. Here we go. Okay, this one is also deeply crucial as well. It's really important for folks to know that if you qualify for the California Alternative Rates for Energy, or what we often call the CARE program, or the FARA program, which is for families of 3 or more. So the CARE program offers deeper discounts on your electric bills than on your gas bills. And the FARA program, and I have a link here to San Diego Gas and Electric's FARA enrollment example, allows you to save 18%. So you want to make sure, if you qualify with respect to income, that you are enrolled in these proper rate plans so that you can minimize your utility bills. I've heard anecdotes about people who would have qualified for CARE or FARA and just didn't know about it yet, and got themselves enrolled and started saving promptly. Okay, my last slide. There's other things that renters can do to minimize costs, especially if they have newly acquired air conditioning for the first time because their building owner installed a heat pump HVAC system, which allows for cooling. So, one thing just to know is that, unlike with gas systems, where it can be a lot of times you are advised to turn things off when you go out for the day, with heat pumps, it can make a lot more sense to keep yourself at a constant thermostat temperature rather than turning the heat pump off and on during the day. And also, very importantly, it's important that renters, I think, have agency and control over their cooling in common sense ways while minimizing costs. So renters can enjoy their cooling while keeping the costs down, or if renters are extremely budget conscious and they have a new heat pump, they can keep the cooling functionality off in the summer or fall. And they will still benefit from the much more efficient heating component of their heat pump. But there's a lot of online resources out there on how to use your cooling judiciously. An obvious one might be, let's say it's 100 degrees outside. You can set your thermostat to maybe 80 degrees instead of, say, 70 degrees. And maybe you haven't fully optimized for comfort in that scenario, but you've still made indoor temperatures safer. Thank you. And here's the appendix. I do not have time to go through it. Please share it and dig into it. We'll send this afterwards. Thank you.
Yeah, just a reminder that, thank you so much, Angela. Just a reminder to everyone in the audience. So all these materials that we're showing you are going to be, we'll send out links or the copies of them to everyone who registered for this. So maybe you missed some of the beginning of this or whatever. We'll send the recording and everything out, so you'll have that. Thanks so much, Angela. That was great. And I hope people appreciate the fact that, while we've been talking a lot about California, these issues are relevant everywhere in the country. There's similar things like this happening almost everywhere. But as usual, California tends to be ahead of the curve on most of these things. So that's why we're focusing there. We just have so many questions about, or comments in the chat about electrical panel upgrades. And it's one of the things that I know Angela, this is dear to her heart, and it's definitely to mine too. Just an FYI to everyone, we did a webinar on this exact topic because it's so important for people to understand that you do not, most of the time, you do not need to upgrade your panel. If you have a panel that's got those old round circuit breakers in them, the fuses, yes, that's just not safe. If you've got a panel that's less than 100 watts, like maybe, or amps, maybe it's like an 80 amp panel, yes, you might need to upgrade. If you've got old knob and tube wiring, yes, you might need some wiring upgrade, really old houses. But if you've got a 100 amp panel, you can electrify your whole home, charge your EV, everything without upgrading your panel. It's 100% possible.
May
You
I
just
add
need to be
something?
aware of it. And unfortunately, but I want to hear what Angela has to say about this. Unfortunately, most electricians won't tell you that. They'll tell you need a panel upgrade. Why? It's an easy $5,000 to as much as 10 grand job for them. Why would they try to talk you out of it? So you need to find an electrician who's aware of this kind of watt diet approach and be educated yourself on how you can buy appliances that take a fraction of the amperage that these other conventional devices need. So Angela, jump in on this because I know that
Yeah,
you're
no,
deep in the
thank you.
weeds on this one.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, I
No,
mean,
you're
I'll
good.
add
You're
to
good.
that. Yes, I mean, upgrading a panel it's certainly a profit mechanism for electricians, but quite honestly, like just in my anecdotal experience working with some of them, some of them, and again, this is my perception of things based on the ones I've worked with, have been trained to be really conservative, unnecessarily so, in my opinion, when they're putting together the loads and sort of mathematically, then it shows that you need to upgrade the panel. But actually, and I showcase this in the appendix, when you start to dig in and you use the right, at least for multifamily, the right National Electric Code, and you put in the correct wattage for each appliance, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, you probably are not going to need to upgrade that panel. And I will say, Brian is right. A lot of the new studies focus on some of the more modern buildings that have 100 amps, which, most likely for the average home or the average, unit inside a multifamily building, you're not going to need to upgrade that, even if you fully electrify everything. I will say in my appendix of my presentation that I showcase the loads for 2 multifamily buildings, one of which we fully electrified and one of which we are about to electrify, hopefully in June, knock on wood. And I was able to get the per unit, per apartment loads down to 45 amps, and then for one, even as low as amps in the 30s. So think about if you had a 100 amp panel, but and you're doing full electrification and your loads are even after that are only 30, you really don't need to upgrade. And a lot of older building stock may not have 100 amps. Like this one building we're about to electrify has 55 to 60, but even so, post electrification, it's 30, 35, 36 amps. So they still don't need to upgrade.
Yeah.
What
I just
were
put a
your-
link. Sorry, I just put a link in the chat to the webinar we did on this. There's also a lot of great devices that are just starting to come on, like circuit sharing devices. So you can share two loads on one circuit and only one of them can be used at the same time. Because how often are you cooking your turkey and charging your EV or whatever, or maybe a better example is doing a load of wash and charging your EV. So there's lots of things like that that are out there that, again, a lot of electricians aren't aware of. And if someone has a good resource for how you find an electrician that's knowledgeable about this stuff, please put it in the chat, because that's always tricky. We've got a few of them here in Oregon, but I know that some of the Switches On folks are on the call. If you've got specific links on that topic of electricians, that could be really useful. So please put it in the chat.
How to find a watt diet electrician. Yeah, so
Yeah.
someone's asking about that. Angela, what were some of the top strategies that you used to bring that electrical load so low in these 2 buildings? You're muted, sorry.
Oops, you're muted.
You're still muted.
You're muted, sorry.
Yeah, I can share my screen again and show those loads, but essentially technology choices. So for the first building, we use the 120 volt washer dryer combos that you mentioned, Joe, which save an incredible amount of space on the electrical panel versus using all electric, sort of old fashioned washer dryers, sometimes called electric resistance. So, and I think actually the energy that we save by choosing the 120 volt combo units instead of just doing the old school electric resistant washer dryers was enough to offset all of the new electricity from the water heater. And the water heater that we did there for a variety of reasons was not the 120 volt water heater. The building owner wanted it at 240, which is larger, and it still was enough. So that was an interesting thing too, is like we didn't even have to use all of the tools in the toolbox for the watt diet, and we were still able to do it. For the next building that we're about to hopefully decarbonize in the East Bay of the Bay Area, California, we that building owner had just purchased new laundry machines, and they're electric, but they're electric resistant, so they take up a lot of space in the panel. And this building owner is budget constrained, and so we suggested moving over to the 120 volt washer dryer combos, but it was just too expensive. Instead, that building owner has chosen to install the 120 volt heat pump water heaters. And so that goes a long way. Now, I will say for that building, this gets to the circuit splitter concept. It's 6 units, and their main panel is only 200 amps. So that's
for all 6 units.
Yes. So, and actually it's currently 5 units, and they want to build a 6th. So I've been modeling it, like, how can we do all of this for 6 units and not upgrade the main panel? And we've been able to do it. So the 120 volt water heaters go a long way. I think in the future, if this building owner wants to add EV charging, they haven't done that yet, they can consider the level 1 charging, like you went over, Brian, or they could use a circuit splitter that pauses laundry while folks charge their car, or vice versa. So there's
also those, I'm sure you're aware of these other devices that are great for EV chargers. Some EV chargers actually now have this as part of the charger, the level 2 charger, that essentially senses the load on the panel.
Yeah.
And it turns itself off if the load on the panel reaches more than 80% of the load. So that means, and so if you think about that in practical terms, what that means, you're charging your car, you come home from work, you charge your car, you're also running your air conditioner, and you decide you need to cook a turkey, and your son or daughter's taking a long hot shower, so that water heater's on at the same time. So for a very brief moment of time, your EV charger is going to turn off, so it can handle those other loads. And then as soon as the water heater is shut down, or the air conditioner's off, or you've stopped cooking or doing a load of laundry, then the EV charger will turn back on. So you won't even notice this as a user, because that's likely to be a very small pause. But it means that you can have a really fat 240 volt connection to your EV charger and not worry about overloading your panel. So there's a lot of really interesting devices like that it's important to know about if you're in that situation where you've got relatively low amps. Again, I'd encourage you to look at the webinar that we did on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say a lot of these technologies are like the one you mentioned about the EV charging, have just recently emerged. And there's also smart panels, and there's a company called Span. And they're, as I understand it, having spoken to them briefly, they're about to launch another piece of their technology that will apply to smaller buildings, that allows for a lot of load management that can help a building owner avoid a panel upgrade as well.
Those are great. I noticed there was also a question in the chat about 15 amps circuits for heat pump water heaters. And Joe, I know you want to jump on that.
I put a quick answer. Yeah, there are all the 120 volt heat pump water heaters just use 15 amps. So that's a good option. And actually Rheem makes a 240 volt 15 amp heat pump water heater. I put a link in the chat for that. So there's lots of options for heat pump water heaters that just use 15 amps.
Great. Hey, I want to pivot to this topic of negotiating with your landlord. So I know that this might be a sensitive thing, because some of you out there, I'm sure if you're a renter, you've got a really good relationship with your landlord. Some of you might not. So, I mean, I know it can be a little tough. I'm wondering, Angela, if you have any, you gave some good advice about, resources that people can use, but have you heard about renters having success by talking to their landlords to get this to happen? I know we're kind of new in this area, so that might be a hard question to answer, but are you familiar with that? Or do you have any tips for how to do this if you're worried about pissing off your landlord?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, overall, I think if you can take a little bit of time up front and first and foremost, maybe identify for that landlord some of the public subsidies that may be available to them to reduce their costs so that landlord doesn't have to go back and research it all themselves. If you provide a lot of that work and research up front, I think that can go a long way in being more persuasive during that conversation, and maybe also acknowledging to them that, you know, there's a lot on their plate and that this is complicated, but that there's a lot of really information out there where they could actually save money and, you know, do this relatively efficiently.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
You know, anecdotally, yes, I have heard of renters having some success. You know, I don't know that this is necessarily well, I know one renter that wanted to they rent a condo unit for a family of 3, and they wanted to install an EV charger, I believe a level 2, and offered to split the upfront cost of the installation of that. In an ideal world, the building owner would cover all of the upfront capital cost. But that was something that renter felt comfortable splitting. And I guess that, you know, half of the cost was something that was palatable, but that may not be possible for everyone.
Yeah, I think that general advice, you know, it's advice we give to homeowners, and also, you know, if you've got older appliances in your home, that's always a good place to start with upgrading to newer, more efficient things. And I think the same is true for renters. If you live in a rental unit and maybe the stove is really old, or you know, the heating system is really old, you know, that's a good place to start the conversation with your landlord and say, hey, you know, this thing is kind of old and might need to be updated recently. Are you aware of these great new alternatives that have these advantages? Boom, boom, boom. And so you can start the conversation around that rather than saying, hey, I want you to electrify my whole place, you know, because that's always hard, you know, to do no matter where you are or in where you live. So yeah, that'd be another.
You know, Brian, I'm really glad you mentioned that because, yeah, I mean, and in that scenario, even if it's slightly more expensive to replace with an electric version, although it may not be, but even if it is, you know, at least at that point, they're just looking at that incremental cost. They're not looking at the cost of the whole thing because they were going to have to replace it anyway.
And have to replace it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's why these incentives are so amazing. I noticed that Switches On, you know, they have a great incentive finder. Rewiring America has another great incentive finder that's national. Switches On is just California. But the whole idea behind those incentives is to levelize the cost basically between really efficient devices and ones that are polluting and not efficient. In some cases, the incentives make them lower costs, but usually it at least makes it a kind of apples to apples comparison, so that if you got to update some of these things, you're going to get a better product for the same amount of money, or very close. So that's the whole point of incentives. Joe, what got any other questions you think we should be tackling here?
I think we have gone a little over time, so this has been
we have
fantastic. Angela, any last thoughts for folks? You know, it's a big topic. We covered a lot today. Any takeaways you want to leave folks with?
If people have burning questions and they want to email me, my email is it's angela@menlospark.org. It's at the beginning of my presentation. You know, feel free to reach out and I can send materials and take a look at the technical appendix as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Angela. That was fantastic. And thank you to all of our participants today. Thanks for showing up. And like Angela says, we're the same. If you've got questions about anything having to do with home electrification, feel free to reach out to us. All our emails are on our website, etc. And if we can't answer your question, we can usually connect you with someone who can. So thanks again. And yeah, good luck with all your electrification projects, whether they're small or large.
Thanks all.